Line. We have the Dark Side of Sports episode today here. But before we jump into this, I want to address something. We've been pushing the envelope a bit too far lately on the show. We've been using naughty language and we've been informed by the language Gestapo that should go nameless, that we've been having a little bit too much fun. So here we go with the watered down, very bland version of the Dark Side of Sports. Introducing first, fresh back from Bible study, Tom McAllister. Tom, howdy.
How are you, Nathaniel?
Oh, you just don't know what he's going to say next. I'm fantastic. I just got done from feeding the poor.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear. We'll see what I do later.
Absolute jeepers creepers. We just don't know where we're going next. Anyway, let's dive right in. This is the Dark Side of Sports, and today I am the man with remorse, Nate Dowdy, and we're going to be talking about drugs in sports. First and foremost, we are not endorsing any of this. We believe that drug offenders, whether they're professional athletes or people on the street, deserve maximum jail sentences with zero time deducted. With that being said, Tom, let's dive right into steroids.
Yes. When you talk about drugs in professional sports, the one that leads the way is steroids. Steroids were pretty much the performance enhancer. As we talked about in the green room before, they're used by track athletes in the 1960s. They're used throughout the NFL. And eventually, the NFL outlawed steroids in 1983, but then started suspending players in 1988 for using steroids. But then, of course, Congress stepped in with Major League Baseball and called Rafael Palmeiro, Jason Giambi, Kurt Schilling. All of them testified in front of Congress talking about steroids, and everyone somehow, some way that Congress called was connected to steroids, except Kurt Schilling.
My God. Haven't they heard of a warm glass of milk and a multivitamin? Eat it for 30 seconds and presto, you have a performance enhancer. They need to get on top of this. But Tom, what sport do you feel is probably the biggest perpetrator of performance enhancers, if there is one?
I would probably have to say the biggest one now that has the most evidence for it would be Major League Baseball, because they had the largest impact. The reason why I say this is because baseball is one of the sports where numbers are sacred. For example, Hank Aaron's home run total of 755 was sacred. Roger Maris's 61 home runs in 1961, even though they have an asterisk, they were sacred. In the 90s, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, and Barry Bonds came on towards the end of their career and put up phenomenal numbers. And, people cheered them. The summer of 1998 with Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, it was riveting television. People were tuning in back and forth. It was a national event when Mark McGwire was batting that fall, when he was trying to break those numbers. Lo and behold, I think, creatine, and androstenedione, I believe, were the supplements that Mark McGwire was connected to. And as time went on, Mark McGwire, those numbers were stained because it's strongly believed that those players used performance-enhancing drugs. Barry Bonds ended up breaking McGwire's record and also ended up breaking Hank Aaron's all-time home run record. Roger Clemens, who won multiple Cy Young Awards. Those are 4 people that have been connected to steroids who are not in the Hall of Fame. So that is one where they kind of have where, who's cheating, who isn't. So I think steroids had the biggest impact on baseball, to say the least, as some people that were considered icons, they had a falling from grace in the court of public opinion.
Now, let me ask you this. In your mind, is does Barry Bonds' record have an asterisk next to it, or is he the home run champion in your book, in your eyes?
That's a very difficult question. One of the arguments that was made against Babe Ruth was that when Babe Ruth was playing, Major League Baseball was not integrated. That they had the Negro leagues, and it took till 1947, which is a year before Babe Ruth died, to start to have African Americans playing in Major League Baseball. Hank Aaron, classy, consistent. People don't realize, I believe, he was getting death threats when he was trying to break Babe Ruth's home run record. A man of tremendous character. And then you have someone like Barry Bonds, Barry Bonds was an extremely gifted athlete. He was, probably bound for the Hall of Fame. And then people start wondering, like, when you're mid to late 30s, you don't put on that much muscle, and it's tough. Will the record stand officially? I think Major League Baseball will keep that as the official home run record, and it'll be up to the people themselves to decide and be like, all right, which one truly is. So it's going to be up to the individual people to decide which records actually stand.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets really murky when you get into subjects like whether they stand. In my book, I think Barry Bonds is the home run champion. I mean, I'm liberal on this, even though I contradicted myself in my message earlier. That I'm in favor of these guys using performance enhancers a lot of times. I mean, you have leagues full of people looking for an edge, and it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher, the amount of ways these people are willing to go to get an edge.
I think it's understandable why people do it when you look at how much money someone can make. If you're trying to go up and make a major league contract, be like, hey, you know what? If everyone else is doing it, I'm going to do it too. So it's almost by like peer pressure. And you got to wonder too, if a lot of people, if there was any job where, you could perform your job better if you take this, whatever, I think people would be pushing that. So it is very challenging. But I think especially in baseball, you've kind of seen the effects because the career players, nowhere near as long as they used to be. I think they're starting to flame out a little bit faster. So those are certain things that would be interesting to see going forward. I think they kind of had an effect. Manny Ramirez, I think, tested positive twice for steroids. Alex Rodriguez was also another poster boy you can throw up there. He got suspended a few times for his use of performance-enhancing drugs. So I think the one where the storyline is most prevalent is Major League Baseball when it comes to the use of steroids.
Right. And you look at A-Rod's case, for instance, and he's a guy who's now on MLB Network and is really loved by the fans because they were willing to forgive him because he owned it. He basically said, hey, yeah, I did it. I got popped. I'll serve my suspension. And they ultimately forgave him for it. Whereas someone like Barry Bonds, still to this day, won't admit to anything. And also Barry Bonds is a bit of I can't say the word, a pee-pee head.
Well, I think too, Barry Bonds was not beloved by teammates. I think was one, his father was a professional baseball player. So I think that could kind of have been an issue. It's also too, like when people that were forgiven and kept on playing, Jason Giambi was called in front of Congress. He admitted it without admitting it. He was there. I'm sorry. He admitted what he did was wrong. People forgave him. Giambi, a lot of people rallied behind him. You had also on the other end of the spectrum, you had Rafael Palmeiro. He vividly pointed, I did not take anything. I only would go out and I would only take performance enhancers that helped me in the bedroom. But it turned out he got caught and the people turned against you. So I think the American public, if you're honest for your mistake, they'll accept you and they'll forgive you. if you lie and say, or if you say I didn't do wrong, and then they eventually catch you, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it's kind of going on, stacking on top of that point. You look at someone in the UFC by the name of John Jones, who's been busted twice now. Really had his suspension cut down by about a half year, and on top of it, he denies all of it. He basically went the Rafael Palmeiro route and said, "Yeah, I went to a gas station and thought I was getting a gas station Viagra, and whoops, I tested positive." And on top of that, it was funny because he was already on the list for people they needed that got priority testing. And so USADA, which is the branch they use to test their fighters in the UFC, showed up at the gym. John Jones didn't want to be suspended, didn't want to take the test, so he goes and hides under the gym octagon. And USADA is sitting there waiting for him this entire time, and he literally just bit the bullet and hid under the octagon. And USADA was looking for a way to be able to go test for urine under the octagon in case he went to the bathroom, and then they didn't grant that. But that goes to that. People hold it against John Jones because he continually makes excuses for his transgressions.
Yeah, and I think it's also too with the UFC and MMA that the major difference is, first off, you need to make your weight. That's the most important thing. So steroids might not be the best supplement because that could lead to athletes bulking up. But there are other supplements that can be used that can be considered performance enhancers. And I think there have been other players that have been caught where they used to listen, I didn't know this was a banned supplement. Where, for example, if you get people from different countries, something that is illegal in the United States could be legal in another country. So that could be something that could cause an issue. It's two things where, the UFC or whoever needs to communicate that to their athletes, and the athletes also need to understand, and comprehend what can I put in my body and what can't I put in my body. And you also get the unique situations when they have diluted samples where they have too much water in their system, which is something that I think is a new way to get out of some of these testing scenarios going forward.
Yeah, and you saw, who's the guy in New Orleans? Zach Vaughn, who got drafted in the third round, fell in the draft because he had a tainted sample, not a tainted, but a diluted sample. And a lot of people drink a lot of water to add water weight. And it's important, particularly at the NFL Combine, that you weigh in heavier in certain positions. So it is kind of a murky thing. And it's funny because when we talk about performance enhancing in baseball, we always point to the home run hitters, the guys who get jacked and everything, but the biggest perpetrators were the pitchers, the guys relying on recovery.
Yeah, I think, we kind of touched on it a little bit. You have Roger Clemens, who became the target in one of these investigations. I believe his trainer got caught and did some time. He did a tell-all book, explained how he gave steroids to his wife. Because Roger Clemens, it looked like a lot of people thought he was done. Then he had a resurrecting career and played another 10 years, which is kind of one of the things that, people started asking questions about. There are probably some other pitchers that you mentioned too, because they need to throw the ball just as hard. Andy Pettit was called about. He said he used HGH. So he kind of got a pass because, he was honest. He at least admitted to something. Clemens, it probably cost him the Hall of Fame. He probably would have been a Hall of Famer. If Clemens was never connected to steroids, he'd be in the Hall of Fame right now. But he was connected, and that's why he's not.
I've always thought it was really interesting. That's the hill baseball decided to die on, because you look at a lot of other people who've been inducted in the Hall of Fame were either racist or they've done all sorts of, really some bad characters that are in the Hall of Fame now, but they're no. You're not getting in the Hall of Fame because you besmirched our precious game. And it is interesting with baseball. It is such an old school, it's America's pastime.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, there is a lot of unspoken rules and regulations in baseball that players adhere to. And so I think that's probably a reason why they have the greatest outrage.
Well, I think too, you bring up a good point. It's for play on the field. It's not for sainthood. Ty Cobb was notorious for not being the nicest guy on the face of the earth. Babe Ruth had some character flaws that weren't really brought to life. Mickey Mantle had one of the quotes where he said, "You thought hitting that home run was hard. You should have seen me try to run the bases," because he was too hungover. Those were things the media kept under wrap. I think their issue was that their play on the field was enhanced by these supplements, while all these other players, being devil's advocate, they didn't have these issues. So those, I think, are some of the things that led to it with these voters. And also baseball is one of the ones, like, they have to implement the rules and the unwritten rules going forward. And then those numbers are sacred, and those numbers have been violated because they use performance enhancing drugs such as steroids.
Absolutely. And welcome to the show, Spinksy. Oh my God. Welcome to our watered down show. And by the way, you just returned from saving a group of koalas, right?
I did, yes. There was a kangaroo that was on human growth hormone, and it was attacking the koalas, and I had to get out there and save it. So that's why we're here talking about drugs in sport.
Absolutely. We were just going over the steroids in baseball and how they've affected, and how it's been affected, and how other sports, there probably hasn't been as much coverage on it as there was in the Major League Baseball. Do you have a take?
Yeah, look, I always found it strange with the baseball. Do you think their legacies are now tainted? Like back in the day, Babe Ruth held the home run record. There was no idea that he was on anything back in the day. But are these records now tainted because of the steroid use, the human growth hormone, that sort of stuff, or do you not care?
Yeah, and you take a look at, we were bringing up before, there briefly in MMA, and particularly the UFC, they were granted permission to use TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. Again, for a while, and you saw fighters like Vitor Belfort looked like he was 15 years younger. And, it was legal. I mean, it was great for older fighters who were overtrained, saying, "Hey, I'm feeling a little bit low on testosterone. Can I get the hookup here?" And then voila, they look 15. They perform like they're 15 years younger. And then when you got off the testosterone replacement therapy, they looked like they gave birth to a bunch of Shar-Pei puppies.
Yeah, my rugby league team over here in Australia, the Cronulla Sharks. The Sharks got caught in 2011 for using human growth hormone. It didn't do them any favours at the time, but they went on to win the premiership in 2016, so 5 years after. So it all exploded in their face in 2013. They had a few guys suspended. They missed half the season. It was all a big scandal at the time, and then they went on to win their first ever premiership 3 years after. So were the drugs longer lasting, and it lasted them 3 years, and they became awesome, and then they went on to win it. It was the first premiership they'd won in 49 years, so I don't really care, to be honest with you. They won.
Yeah, exactly. So in your mind, you want to win by any means necessary.
Yes, and I found they're always trying to push the boundaries. Like, nothing's illegal until you get caught, right? So there used to be a thing back in the day where you could take your blood out of yourself and run it through this machine and back into you again, and that raised the level of your white blood cells, and that made you fitter, made you stronger, made you this. But that's just a natural way of doing it. There was nothing illegal about that, and then they've now made this process illegal. So until it happens and someone gets caught, nothing's actually deemed to be bad. So I just think teams are pushing the boundaries these days. Like back in the day, you used to have a beer and a cigarette at half time. I think, and then they worked out that was bad. And then they're sort of going through having a meat pie and a can of Coke. And then they're going into eating oranges because it's high in vitamin C. And none of this stuff is wrong, but they're working out the best way to do it. And I think teams are trying to push that boundary to get that edge more and more and more. Like back in the day, there was no Gatorade, and now everyone's on Gatorade. So the more teams can do to make their advantage a little bit stronger, when all teams are roughly the same, they're gonna do it.
Now, Tom, I'll ask you here: would it taint your view of the team, of your favorite team, if they were caught cheating but yet brought home a championship?
I think too, being a Yankee fan, since a lot of the people that were named were Roger Clemens, Andy Pettitte, Jason Giambi was a member of the Yankee. I think it definitely hurts it. You go into the self-defense mechanism where, blah, blah, blah. Well, Manuel Ramirez got caught and everyone forgot about it. David Ortiz apparently was on that list and everyone all of a sudden started talking about it. You can kind of make the argument like, well, if everyone else is doing it, how come are we? It's when it comes to baseball, and since I'm wearing my Yankee hat, you got to be a great baseball player first before you can take steroids. Just because you take steroids doesn't mean you can be a Hall of Famer. It definitely does impact it when you talk about, theoreticals and comparing it to teams of different generations. For example, how would the 27 Yankees have done if Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig were taking steroids? Those were kind of some things too. I definitely think it would impact it. It would definitely deal with more hate, to say the least, from the opposition, and it's something to knock you down. But it does look like Mariano Rivera never took steroids. So as long as we got that, it kind of does help out. But I definitely think it would be, I don't think any of the professional sports will take away a championship.
Yeah.
Because of anything like that. So, I think the championship will still stand, but the court of public opinion, they'll use it to knock you down.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's funny about the court of public opinion, that wanes with time. If you go 20 years back, no one's going to remember and be like, wait a minute, the Yankees championships in the early, in the 90s were tainted because of steroids. It fades from memory. And an interesting point about steroids, it's not an ace in the hole. It's not going to take an average college player and make him a Major League Baseball Hall of Famer. It's going to take an average player and make him good. Maybe he'll start instead. It's not going to take some tomato can and make him a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I'm all for it. Like, in all honesty, I'm all for it. Who wouldn't want to see, whether it's steroid use, human growth hormone, whatever, who wouldn't want to see someone at the Olympics to run the 100 in 4.6 seconds? If you're on all this human growth hormone, you're on steroids, you're on this, you're on that, the drug Olympics would be awesome. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Tom, how do you feel?
Tom?
I think, with Spinksy, Saturday Night Live did a sketch about 30 years ago about the drug Olympics, where the guy goes to try to set a deadlift record and he rips off his arms. So I do think with it too is the reason why they kind of went against performance enhancers were that, one, it was deemed illegal because it was connected to cancer. I believe Lyle Alzada, the former player for the Raiders, he was the first one who came out and was like, listen, these are the health issues, these are the health effects. So I think that's the reason why it became outlawed. What was like, one, all right, if you can't get it over the counter, there's an issue. And two, I think supplements started to come out, or, steroids used to be the only one, but over the last 30 to 40 years, the supplement industry has stepped up immensely, whether it's creatine, androstenedione, like you get something that's right before testosterone. So there's many more options about it. So I think though too, with the Olympics, it's something where, it's about fairness, as the Olympic members are taking bribes on where to perform. But anywho, that's a different conversation for a different episode. I think though too, they're supposed to be amateurs, so they're not supposed to be getting paid either. I think it would take away from you try to think that these athletes are the best and purest and hardest working, and when you mention something as like illegal supplements, that does take the effect down.
Yeah,
well,
well,
for sure.
Some of the biggest perpetrators of performance enhancers are Olympic sprinters or Olympic runners. I mean, it's riddled with that industry because remember when the Balco case came down, probably a great majority or a good portion of the people linked to Balco were Olympic sprinters. So, I mean, it's one of those things where basically if you're Russian, it's okay. As long as you bring home the gold and you won't find yourself in the back of a dumpster shot.
It didn't work for Ivan Drago.
Didn't work for Drago.
They shot it into his arm. I thought I was so mad because they performed the steroids wrong.
No. Look, you always want the Olympics to be fair. They only come around every 4 years. You work your ass off in that time. It needs to be fair. However, I think if people are always taking drugs, that's going to happen. So why not have a separate Olympics for that? Everyone's seen the East German swimmers back in the day, the Russians. These girls were massive. They had the shoulders on them like that, and like you knew they were on it. So I understand if you finish second to someone like that, obviously you're upset because you worked your bum off all this time to get there, and you get screwed over by them. That's bad. But if we can have an Olympics like that, where they could do a 15-meter high jump, whatever, I want to see that. I want to see 100 running 4.6 seconds. I want to see a long jump over 50 meters. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. But it needs to be fair. So you can't just have everyone on something and not on something else. And yeah, if they want to do it to themselves.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this is at least professional sports. This is entertainment, you know? So they're essentially, as consumers, they're there to entertain us. And so I'm there. I want them to entertain us by any means necessary. Don't test the players whatsoever. And just let fly.
How's it work in baseball these days? Because they allowed it for a few years, didn't they?
Well, they just wouldn't test.
It pretty much, baseball stepped in because Congress was ready to step in. Where, they had that hearing and, they collectively bargained and, I think it was like 103 out of the X amount of people tested positive for it. So it slowly came in and they keep on changing. So it's been about 15 years. I think, and the funny thing is too, I don't think they really popped that many people with the test, but they usually get them from these investigations where there's a criminal investigation and the information gets turned over to Major League Baseball. Those are kind of the ways they get most of their people.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Congress, for taking a poo-poo in the punch bowl here.
Just ruined it.
But anyway, we talk about other sports, drugs in sports. We shift over to cocaine, a hell of a drug. Anyway, and you look at leagues like the NBA that were just riddled with cocaine problems through the 80s. They interviewed some players and they estimate that, again, this is just a complete estimate here, that they say about 80% of the league was using coke. And that was a huge black eye for the NBA until Air Jordan saved the day in the 90s and brought Happy Meals to everybody. Now, this is completely different. This is not necessarily deemed a performance enhancer. Do you guys have an opinion about street drugs?
Yes.
Not for personal use, but
for personal use or not? Look, I've never touched drugs in my life, and drugs are bad, kids. So don't do drugs ever. It's bad for you. But if you're earning that much money and you've got a fast car and you've got a nice house and what else are you gonna do with it? And what's better than having cocaine from a stripper? Nothing. Even though I wouldn't know. Just so we know. So we're clear on that.
We're good Christian people here. You know,
Sure,
the language police, you know, this was just a joke. This was a joke. Ha 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 ha. Tom, do you have an opinion about it?
I think a lot of players learn their lesson in the NBA, especially, you know, because it was mentioned in the Bulls documentary, the Chicago cocaine circus, about the 84 Bulls, and then Jordan came along. But I think what people learned their lesson was the incident with Len Bias. You know, Len Bias was the number 2 draft pick in the 1986 NBA draft. They thought he was going to be the heir apparent. He's going to go with Larry Bird. And a day or two after being drafted by the Celtics, he died of a cocaine overdose. So I think that was the message to players, where it's like, you know what, I should probably, you know, try to stay off this stuff, you know, because Len Bias is one of the arguments, like, you know, going back in revisionist history, like how he would have been if he didn't overdose. You know, some people thought he'd be even more athletic and he was on par with Jordan. Unfortunately, we don't know that. So I think players eventually learned that, you know, they need to stay away from cocaine over time if they want to have long careers in the NBA. And also, it doesn't help you with your performance. If anything, it reduces your performance.
Right. And then that's the interesting thing. It doesn't, well, at least that we know of, that it helps performance enhancing. And I want to bring up another guy who I really think is a despicable human being. I think what he did is absolutely just criminal, and that's Ricky Williams. What was he thinking? I mean, I've given you examples: warm milk, multivitamins, and he says, what? I'm going to smoke the ganj. Tens of millions of people die in the world every year because of marijuana overdoses. What the heck were you thinking?
It's so bad, isn't it? It's so bad. Yeah. How dare he? It's terrible. Again, don't do drugs, kids. It's bad for you. But it's smoking the weed. Like, it's good for you. It's kind of a health thing. Like, I don't know why the NFL comes down on this so hard. I think this year they've changed the rule, so we'll get Josh Gordon back hopefully this year. But they have, the NFL's got the wrong idea on so many things. Like, you guys have just legalized marijuana over in the States in the last couple of seasons, and so I think it's better for them to have that kind of outlet too. There's you can't deny them everything. After all, they're humans. So, Tom, how do you feel? Do you think marijuana should be legal throughout all sports, or?
I think what makes it interesting and what hurts the NFL power and all the other major sports organizations is that, first off, you know, like Spinksy mentioned, there are already states that have it legal. So it kind of hurts it where it's like, well, you know, if it's legal, it kind of hurts the NFL's power for it, to suspend people for it. I think one of the interesting things is, I saw it on the Daily Show once where, you know, players would get suspended more for, you know, hitting a bong than they would for hitting their wife. And I think that kind of started to turn and vilify, you know, when Ricky Williams came out and retired because of, you know, oh, he wants to smoke weed and all that stuff. That kind of hurt his image because a lot of players weren't doing that back then. That might be more acceptable now. I think as a society, it's not deemed on as evil anymore, or it's not there. Hey, some people, they're legalizing it and they're making a profit off it. And it's potentially a better option than some painkillers out there. And it's a way that, you know, players could use to solve with pain management, which is something the NFL really really doesn't discuss that much. So I think with it too, I think the leagues could easily go out and be like, you know what, we're not going to worry about this. And they could use the logic that, like, it's legal in certain states. How can we outlaw people from using it?
Yeah, and you saw people like Calvin Johnson after he retired would go into how he'd smoke weed, and people like Chris Long said he'd smoke weed after every game, just because it was a way to get away from the painkillers. And people have a way of deeming something evil because it's legal, whereas something else, there's just a complete double standard here. I mean, we see, despite the tens of millions of marijuana deaths every year, we see even more from prescription drugs.
Yes, I don't see how recreational drugs should be banned at all. If you want to go out on the weekend and do your thing, you go for it. You do what you got to do, because outside the game, the sport doesn't own you. I understand if you take a human growth hormone or steroids or whatever, that's going to help your performance on the field, then no, that's not right. But if you want to go out and have cocaine with strippers, or you want to smoke weed with your friends or whatever, go for it. That's on you. That's only going to hurt your performance on the field. So that's on you. Tom, how do you feel?
Just, if you're the NFL, whatever you do not get on a boat in Miami the week before a playoff game. Absolutely don't do that. How dare you do that before a game? But I think, to counter argument with Spinksy, they need to clarify, all right, if you're an owner, how would you feel if one of your best players had a cocaine issue?
Yeah.
I think that is kind of the problem too. And also, if you get, a serious, drug issue, like let's say cocaine or something, that could open it up even more to this person could be told, like, listen, you owe us X amount of money. We need you to have a horrible game. So I think there needs to be, like recreational drugs, they kind of needs to be a definition for it to clarify it. Like, I think alcohol, people are like, listen, if you don't drink and drive and if you don't do anything stupid, that's okay. Like 1 or 2 to relax, it is fine within moderation. But once it starts impacting your play, that's when I think it becomes an issue.
There's a guy we have over here in the AFL called Ben Cousins, and Cousins was huge in the late 90s. And when I was sort of growing up, Cousins was one of my favorite AFL stars. And he got hooked in with drugs, he got hooked in with bikies, hooked in with the wrong crowd, and he's gone downhill ever since. He'd be probably mid-30s, early 40s now. Long hair, big beard. He's probably served 5 or 6 stints in jail over this time, always off his face. I think at the moment he's just gone back in. He spent about 6 months out. It seemed like he was going okay, and he's gone back in again since. So as a kid growing up, you kind of idolized those sports stars. So I can kind of see how recreational drugs can be a problem for young kids, because they'll see their favorite star go down that path and then think that drugs are okay, and drugs are not. Kids, they're not. They're bad.
Yeah, and to kind of answer Tom's question about how teams would deal with someone with a cocaine addiction, it's kind of like, at the end of the day, your team has to have the culture of what's right and what's wrong. If you do that and it's affecting your professionalism, that's just a completely different thing, whether it's you oversleeping, being hungover in team meetings, and so. So I think the structure needs to be in place in the first and foremost before. I just don't like the idea of testing for recreational drugs.
I think it's also too, it's, they kind of went along with, first we wanted the performance enhancers. That's why they did the drug testing. Then they went into the recreational, which is and it keeps on changing and evolving. And, chemistry, usually the league is usually a few months behind because you get a new chemical or supplement that people can use. But I definitely think, I'll bring back Mickey Mantle. I don't think the owners of the Yankees really stepped in and had an intervention for him. They're like, listen, he could be hungover, but if he's still hitting home runs for us, great, go.
And then how's that too? Like, obviously it's not illegal to drink. So if you got a drinking problem, as you were just saying, if it's not affecting your performance, like, what do you do? Yeah. hard as an owner, isn't it?
You look at someone like Johnny Manziel, who never failed a drug test, but at the same time, he'd be showing up hungover constantly, and it was obviously affecting his ability to be a professional, and the team took action and got rid of him. Same with Josh Gordon. A lot of times, when he was cut by teams, not only did he test positive, but he was having a problem being professional. So that's where kind of it affected his work life. And that's when the teams took action. I mean, if he was there still with the 1,600 yards receiving, not a problem, And so, and conversely, we talk about, the bad things about recreational drugs were marijuana. I know a lot of people who practice jujitsu go into it stoned, for the reason being it puts them in kind of a more of a flow state. They get more creative. So it is interesting. So not all street drugs are not necessarily not performance enhancers.
There you go. Yeah, because obviously people who get punched in the head all the time would probably smoke a lot more weed because that helps them. So yeah, very interesting side of that. I hadn't actually thought of that. So
yeah, and here's the way I look at it is that basically if you're not going into a game high, who cares? Despite my good Christian nature, that I would never ever do drugs again. Never ever. Vitamins, Hulk Hogan promos, that's all you need.
Yeah, Hulk Hogan never did anything wrong.
No.
Never did. But anyway, with it too, I think the balance is, because owners look at players as investments. And with Johnny Manziel, Josh Gordon, the risks do not outweigh the investment you would make. I think Manziel had those questions beforehand, and he proved everyone right, unfortunately. He proved the doubters right when he went to Cleveland. Josh Gordon, he's given so many chances, and he just can't get his act together. So those are the kind of things, I think you have a problem when, your play starts getting impacted. Lawrence Taylor, he used to smoke crack, and that's well documented. And, the Giants stepped in, and he's like, hey, the Giants helped me, and he still gets in problems since retirement, but that could have been a situation where, like, he's playing great on the field, where the better the player you are, the more leeway you'll get. If he was the 53rd man on the roster, he probably would have been out of the NFL.
Yeah, there's stories about Michael Irvin in the 90s where he would just be out partying all night, doing coke, doing whatever, and he'd bring his teammates along, kind of lesser players, and he'd force them to drink. To rephrase one of his famous lines was, female extremity, a female body part that I cannot name right now because of other people monitoring us, can't handle a little bit of water. So he'd get his players nice and sloshed and everything. They show up the next day. Michael Irvin's in the gym at 5 a.m, lifting weights, ready to come on, and these guys just barely have their eyes open. So
experience, yeah. Having watched the Jordan documentary the last couple of weeks, they talk about Dennis Rodman when Rodman went to Vegas on that infamous trip.
Yeah.
And then Rodman goes on to talk about he's never touched drugs. You're a liar, Dennis. You're a liar.
Prison for Dennis. I will not stand for anything less.
Yeah, I think he did alcohol. And I think that was clear. But I think too, he might have been one of those guys that's so weird. If he did drugs, he would have became normal.
He is very weird, actually. Yeah, the hair, the earrings, the tattoos, everything, the wedding dress that he wore. Dennis is clearly off his face always.
Yep.
Well, he was actually on that celebrity rehab show with Dr. Drew.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it's funny because when they were introducing him to the show, they have the camera crew follow him, and they have these guys falling on their faces, and doing all sorts of embarrassing stuff. And then Dennis Rodman is at this party, and he goes up to a couple of young women. He goes, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Dennis Rodman. Bedroom right now. Bedroom." And so he's just pointing there, and these girls are like clutching their chests, because as they should, as good Christian women. But he's just one of those guys who's just completely out there, and we have no one other to thank other than Madonna.
Yeah, it's her fault. Yeah.
So burn your Madonna albums. She's what's an appropriate word I could use? She is an S word.
Harlot.
Very nice person.
Yeah.
She's a corrupter. Does she even still make good music anymore?
My Madonna albums, when I saw the Jordan documentary, I just absolutely lost it and burned it all.
So basically, if there's one thing we teach young athletes today is, 1, don't do drugs, 2, don't date Madonna.
Absolutely, and there's been a fair share of those who have.
Yeah.
Alex Rodriguez was one of them.
Was he well? He got her in her 50s too. Good Lord, Alex. I mean, if you want something to be outraged about, no, it's not the steroid abuse. It's Madonna.
But it's also too, Nate. I believe A-Rod was still married when I'm not sure. I got to check the timeline on that. So I'm pretty sure I know how your values would be offended by such an action of an athlete going out of his marriage vows.
Yeah, you know what? And Jose Canseco was a decent enough person to let Jennifer Lopez know about Alex Rodriguez's transgressions outside of the marriage. They were planning on having a holy vow that YouTube would approve of. And then Alex goes and spits in her face. And Jose Canseco, he was man enough to go and Karen her. That's what these are the morals athletes need to have nowadays. Even though he did admit to a certain substance and outing other people.
Snitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Nate, which one are you more offended about? Alex Rodriguez going outside his marriage vows, or Alex Rodriguez using performance-enhancing drugs?
Alex Rodriguez going out of the sanctity of marriage. Are you kidding me? Or I don't think they got married yet, but he made the commitment. He put a ring on it. This is a man who's supposed to have principle. And he goes and spits in the face of Jennifer Lopez.
I mean, all I got to say is now Alex Rodriguez got to worry about Beyonce because he put a ring on
it. Anyways, guys, I've taken about as much as I can handle in this conversation here. This has just been, I need to seek therapy again after these conversations. Do you guys want to close on anything, or is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys want to have covered?
No, I just think it's hard to be in the NBA these days and not be on coke if you're trying to chase a Kardashian. So just leave it with that.
Well, let me ask you this question. Are you doing coke so you're dating a Kardashian, or since you're dating a Kardashian, you start doing coke? Lamar Odom was doing okay till he started getting involved with a Kardashian. Like, just stay away from the Kardashians, please. Just stop. Don't watch them. Just stay away.
Yeah, Madonna 2.0.
Yeah.
But there's like multiple of them. It's a horrific sequel.
Yeah, and you probably get herpes on top of it too. So that's a no-go. Thank goodness for modern medicine.
If you're lucky, that's only it.
Yeah, I mean, just ask Magic. And Magic Johnson's another one of these. I mean, not performance actually, you know what? I think his AIDS cocktail is a performance enhancer. He should be ashamed of himself for returning. Or did I break another rule by bringing up the A word?
Poor Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, guys, why don't we go? Is there anything else you guys want to talk about that we haven't? We've talked about the corruptors of various leagues and the dangers of drugs. Don't do it.
Those kids, don't do it.
YouTube will come after you. Anyways, why don't you tell us where we can go ahead and follow you, and we could get into a group Bible study together. Tom, tell where we can go ahead and find you.
All right, you can find me on Twitter at defend_com. So it goes, let me try to get it right about here, at DFENDS_com. Great talking with you guys today.
Absolutely. And you know what? He's defending the good name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So thank you for your work, Tom. Spinksy, down under, you're saving animals left and right. What else do you got going on, man? Fill us in.
We have a college football show, which is on 3 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday afternoon. It'll be myself and you, Nate. We will be talking about name, image, and likeness. We'll be talking about Power 5 versus Group of 5. And in 9 minutes' time, there's a documentary on the SEC network called One for the Ages, which is about LSU's season last year. So everyone get off here now and go watch the SEC network for an LSU documentary. Make sure you watch it on your own.
Well, you know, Spinksy, I can't do it because I'm heading to the soup kitchen right now, feeding families all across the city. You know, I wouldn't have it any other way. I felt the boot of the Gestapo getting to me, and I changed my ways. So I am no longer the man with no remorse. I am a man with deep remorse. So if you want to join the millions of people that are in queue to go ahead and follow me on Twitter, you may do so at No Remorse Sports. I'm getting that changed pronto, but for now, it's No Remorse Sports, no spaces, so you can go ahead and follow. And when you go ahead and follow us, we're going to be doing weekly shows like this all the time, particularly on Wednesdays, The Dark Side of Sports, and Lesson Like You Play, with intention.